presentation is on defensive driving. Like I said, this is one of those regional trainings that we normally do. And this is a subject that we believe in at the Trust. We really see the impact of that each and every year as we see injuries, we see lots of property damage, and unfortunately, occasionally we see fatalities that happen within the Trust members. And so it's an important subject for us. So as you go into this, if you're just checking a box, that's great. But I always like, when I do training, to have a purpose. I want to have something that I can change about me, something that I can improve. And so and you'll hear this a couple of times today, but I encourage you to set a goal today. Come up with something and write it down and say, I'm going to do this to be better. And whatever your reasoning may be, it may be for your kids that you've got at home. It may be for something totally different, but set that commitment. All right. So this subject hits close to home to many of us. And I ask you out there, what's the personal toll been on your family, on those in your extended family and people close to you? Have you lost somebody as a result of a car crash? I did a count one day going through my extended family and all of the fatalities in crashes, and I was really blown away by the impact that this has had on my own family. And as I look at this picture that's on the screen, it has its own impact. Several years ago, I was at home on a Saturday night. Snowstorm had just gone through, but it cleared out, and so the air was nice and clear after that. And one of my kids comes up to me and asks me, he said, "What's going on over there on the mountain?" I live up in Cache Valley, and where Valley View Highway goes out, there were a whole bunch of flashing lights and then tail lights behind that. And I said, "Wow, they've closed Valley View Highway. That must be a fatal. Must be a really bad crash to have that happen, to have them close the highway down like that." So had a fleeting conversation at that time with my wife. Wouldn't that be terrible to get a phone call or have a police officer show up at your house and tell you that somebody had passed away from a car crash, and didn't think any more of it. Until late that evening, I was in a state of semi-consciousness in my recliner, and the phone rang, and I thought, "Oh, that isn't good." It was about 11 o'clock. Who's calling this time of night? My wife answered the phone, and I could hear, as she started the conversation, her voice started to crack. And so I got up and I went into the kitchen and to listen what had happened. And a story was related that ended up with this picture. And my uncle and my cousin had been returning. My cousin was coming back from college, and they were driving in a little pickup on Valley View Highway. And this fast storm came through, dropped a few inches of snow, and an oncoming Cadillac Escalade, whose driver apparently was in a hurry, tried to pass some vehicles, got out of control, and hit my uncle and cousin's little pickup head on. And unfortunately, those two men were killed instantly in that crash. And I had been teaching defensive driving for quite a while at that point, and knew all the stuff and the important things about that. But suddenly all of those things really got personal. The decisions that people made were really important. They led to some people that were close to me not living, and the impact that had on their family was really profound for years to come. Well, that's kind of a sad way to start a training, but I imagine if we pulled this group that's out there right now watching, there's probably a few more tragedies that that we could tell that that would really yank at the heartstrings. And so as we look at this, if you need some reason to do the things that we're talking about today, think about that. Think about those people that are close to you, and keeping yourself safe, keeping them safe is part of this. And as we go through this training, you know, as I've gone around and done regional training on this, we've asked people that, or told people, if they want to bring their spouses, they want to bring their teenage, you know, driving age children in to watch this, to please do it. Well, we're doing a little bit different this year. We're doing it online, but that'll make it even easier. It's something that you could share easily with your family members. If there's something in here that that you think would be worthy of sharing, I'd invite you to do so. So, all right, there's a big personal toll there. Let's make some commitments today. So I'll ask you a quick question here. Are you a good driver? So when that question hits you, most people, well, yeah, I'm a good driver. What are you talking about? I ask why. Why do you say that you're a good driver? What is it that you do that would make you a good driver? Can we ask this question and answer it honestly? And then I'll ask you a follow-up question. Are you a defensive driver? Does anybody know what a defensive driver is? You know, we think about defensive driving training. Oh man, I got too many tickets. I have to go take a defensive driving class, or hey, I got in an accident and I have to take this class. Or, you know, every other year we have to do this class. What does it really mean to be a defensive driver? You know, this is my opinion on this subject, but I think a defensive driver is somebody who is aware. They drive aware. They are decisive in their actions. When they make a decision based on what's going on around them, they do it, and they are not necessarily aggressive, but they're decisive in their actions. I think a defensive driver is courteous. They take a look at the totality of the situation and say, me allowing that person to merge actually helps all of us out and puts us all at less risk. They realize that we're in this for a team, as a team, getting from place to place, and if we can work together, we're going to get there safer, and we'll probably get there quicker as well. Sometimes we have to take one for the team as a defensive driver. Sometimes we have to let that jerk go through the four-way stop, even though I got there a little bit ahead of him. Because if I do that through my career, my driving career, I'm going to have fewer accidents. I'm not saying you're immune from those, but defensive drivers have fewer accidents. And if I go out there with my elbows out and I say, I was here, it's my right of way, I'm going. If I go through my life with that attitude, I'm going to have more crashes, and the chances that my family gets hurt go way up. All right, more questions. Have you been in an accident? Statistically speaking, you'll have one crash about every 10 years during your driving lifetime. So you ask yourself, well, how long's it been since I've had a crash? And if you say, I've never been in a crash, you're in pretty fine category of people there that are in that group. Were you at fault in a crash that you're involved in? Do you have any violations on your record? Interestingly, we have close to 20,000 drivers that are in our motor vehicle records watch list. Basically, each of us are in there as a driver for a local government agency that's insured with the trust, and we watch out for those drivers. And of those 20,000-ish drivers that we have, only about 10% have anything on their record, any violations on their record. Well, what does that mean? That means if you've got one or more violations on your record, you're in a high risk category. You're probably paying a lot more in your personal auto insurance than you would if you didn't have those violations on there. All of these things are impacts. Have you had a close call recently? Did you speed on your way to work to get there on time so you didn't miss this webinar? So you got here on time. Have you hit a rumble strip lately? every one of these things are a risk, are a risky action or risky behavior that kind of indicates something about us. Well, or hit a rumble strip, big deal, right? Well, I believe all of us can improve our driving. And that's why we do this class. I include myself in this, and I'm probably in as much need as anybody out there to improve. And I think we all need to improve our driving. And how can I make a bold statement like that and say we all need to improve? Well, the reason is because the numbers show it. This is for the state of Utah. This is 0 fatalities, and there's tons of great information there, and we support their goal of eliminating fatal crashes on Utah's roads. We've seen the numbers going absolutely the wrong direction. We were actually seeing some of the lowest fatality numbers ever recorded on Utah roads in 2019. 2018, 2019, and even before that. And then 2020 came along and we blew those numbers out of the water, even though a good portion of 2020 found many people stuck in their homes and not driving very much, not going on vacations and not commuting to work nearly as much. Our road fatalities jumped significantly. Our crashes jumped significantly. And in 2021, it's gotten even worse. We're really on a bad path. We will probably break 300 fatalities on Utah roads. And if you go back just a few years, we were down about 220, and any fatalities are too many. But when we start talking increases like that, we're kind of off the rails, and we need to do better. Well, how does that compare with the trust? We've seen similar increases there. Fortunately, I'll knock on wood, not on the fatality category, but on our crashes. Our claims have increased by better than 10% over in 2020, and we're on track to be similar in 2021. As we look around the state of Utah, our speed-related deaths and crashes are up. Our teen driver deaths are up. Whoops, sorry, I hit the wrong button. Wow. It's an up arrow. Apologize for that. Wrong button. Our teen-related deaths are up. Impaired driving deaths are up. Unrestrained vehicle deaths are up. On most all categories, we are going absolutely the wrong direction. We need to work together as a team to help that out. Even motorcycle accidents, they're at all-time highs, most we've seen ever, I believe, and all the statistics I looked at, this was the highest we've seen. And we haven't even finished out 2021 yet. And one area that I thought, this is a national trend, pedestrian fatalities are at a 10-year high. We kept pushing these down and down and down. And then in 2009, it started back up, and it looks like it's going to continue to increase. Why are we seeing that? Well, I think there's a number of reasons why we would see that. Number one, I think our distractions are up, not just for drivers, but also for pedestrians. And those distractions can cause us injury in many different ways. Well, we are all at risk on the road. It doesn't matter where you live. You could be in a rural part of the state. You could be in an urban part of the state. It doesn't matter what you drive, a big truck or a small little smart car. We're all at risk of those things. And as we look at the statistics, these are for the state of Utah. Fatalities happen generally on sunny days, on bare and dry roads in good conditions. And it doesn't matter your gender, it doesn't matter your age. We're all at risk. Now, those risks can be higher based on if you're a really young driver that doesn't have a lot of experience, or you've got kids that are in that category, they're at more risk, and we need to focus a little more attention on them to help them get the experience that they need. Okay. All right, so ask a quick question here. What's the most important defensive driving technique? Of everything that you've ever heard in defensive driving, what is the most important technique? Well, in my opinion, it's the one technique that applies to you. It's the thing that you need to do to improve your driving and make yourself safer. So today, whatever that is, whatever the technique is that we talk about, or maybe something that we don't talk about that you know that you need to work on, let's make that the goal. Let's put it down on a piece of paper and say, I'm going to fix this about me, or I'm going to improve this about me. Okay. All right, let's set that goal today. Because the statistics are not good, and we're having a bad year, and I'm afraid it's going to continue unless we can really work together. Okay, so defensive driving, I believe, is a combination of controlling your vehicle and controlling yourself. You don't have control over the other drivers. You don't have control over the weather. You don't have control over many things that are out there, but you do control yourself. You control your vehicle, you control your temper, you control, your how much sleep you have before you go driving, and all of those things. Let's focus on those things that we can control, and that will help us to be a defensive driver. Okay. Here's some tactics that we'll talk about today, or techniques, whatever you want to call those: awareness, space management, speed management, personal preparation, and vehicle preparation. And these include a lot of different subjects. And we're going to burn through these fairly quickly. We've distilled down a lot of information into a 1-hour webinar, but don't let that stop you from asking questions or making comments if you have those. So on the awareness level, the first tactic that we talked about, preventable collisions. What do you think? Are collisions preventable? As I've taught this class for years and worked with law enforcement officers around, I've asked them the question: what percentage of crashes, of automobile crashes, do you think are preventable? And it's almost a unanimous chorus that comes back to me: all of them, or almost all of them. The police officers don't really mince words when it comes to that. They say, yeah, well, obviously they were driving too fast, or they were following too closely, or they blew the stop sign, or whatever it is. If they did X, they would have prevented the crash. Well, how do we prevent crashes? It takes some input from us to prevent the crashes. And so let's look at this in light of awareness. Awareness is that key part of driving that can help us avoid those crashes. This video was taken just last week, I believe. Pretty astounding. If you look closely, there's the driver waving, "Help, help." Please tell them in this vehicle that videoed what was going on, pulled in front of the semi and got them to stop. But apparently they'd been driving like this for more than a mile. The cars got tangled up, and the driver had no clue that this person was trapped under their vehicle. Awareness is essential in safe driving. So there are a couple of things that we'll talk about: scanning and eliminating distractions, so we can have that awareness. Scanning is one of those things that you say, well, what are you talking about when you talk scanning? It's being aware of those risks that are out there on the highway. Your number one job as a driver is to identify the hazards that are out there in enough time that you can take appropriate action. You need to be able to identify a hazard, because if you don't, it's still a hazard to you. It doesn't change the nature of the hazard if you don't see it or feel it or sense it in one way or another. it's still a hazard and it can still kill you. So our job is to identify that hazard in enough time to take the appropriate action. Well, what does that mean? Well, this person obviously did not identify the hazard, which was a downed utility line. I don't know if it was power or whatever it was, and they drove directly into it. Okay, so let's talk scanning briefly. What does scanning mean? Well, that means scanning the area, scanning 360 degrees to see what are the hazards around me. And so here's some techniques in scanning. Move your eyes. Now, a lot of this stuff sounds pretty simple, right? It is. There's nothing revolutionary in this presentation today. That's a terrible thing to say. I would like to say that, oh man, I've got it all down. But these are simple things. And if we practice these things and make it a part of our driving technique, we're going to prevent these crashes. So simple thing, move your eyes. Don't focus on any one thing for more than a couple of seconds. Okay. That means looking around, turning my head, looking at my mirrors, paying attention to what's going in all directions around me. How far ahead do I look? Well, the standard is that we're looking at least 15 seconds ahead, 15 travel seconds. And of course, that gets longer the faster that we're going. But just to put it in context, I always want to be, if I'm in city traffic, I want to be looking at least to the next intersection. If I'm out in a country road, I'm looking as far as I can see to see what is happening. In city driving, we're obstructed, our view is obstructed, so we need to be focused at least to that intersection. What do I scan for? Well, I'm going to scan for many things. Is there a vehicle coming into my lane? What are the vehicles that I'm traveling with doing? Are they going to be changing lanes? Is that pedestrian going to step off the sidewalk? I've got a green light, but is somebody going to blow through their red light and come into my intersection? So I'm scanning, I'm moving my head, I'm moving my eyes. I don't get focused on one thing for too long. I need to be checking my mirrors. Now, this number I have in here is every 7 seconds. I've got to be checking at least one of my mirrors. It's all over the place. What they tell you, anywhere from 3 to 8 seconds, something like that. I like 7. That sounds good. Periodically, I need to check at least one of my mirrors and then rotate through so I'm seeing all of those mirrors, so I know what's happening behind me as well as in front of me. It's interesting, as I drive around and I put a lot of miles on, I'll see somebody in the inside lane of the freeway driving along, and an emergency vehicle, an ambulance or a police officer will come up behind them, lights and sirens blaring, and get right up on their tail. Now, I don't recommend that. I think that's an unsafe act for those responders to do that. However, they're there and they need that person out of the way so they can go and do whatever their task is. And sometimes this will go on for the space of a mile, where this person has absolutely no clue that there's an emergency vehicle behind them. And then suddenly they notice and they panic and they jump over into the next lane. Let's not be one of those folks that looks kind of foolish out there. Let's be aware of what is happening around me. Let's practice what if scenarios. What if this kid is not nearly as good a bicyclist as they ought to be out here on the highway? What if that pedestrian crosses the road in the wrong place? What if that guy in front of me jumps over into my lane? I try to predict other people's behavior, and it's something that helps me to keep my mind engaged as I'm putting lots of miles on. What is it that guy's going to do? I bet he comes over into my lane and he's not going to use his turn signals when he does it. Yep, there he goes. But I was prepared for that, so it didn't catch me by surprise. What if? And take the signals. Use all of your senses. Now we focus a lot on our eyes, and our eyes are incredibly important in driving, but there are other senses as well: vibrations, noises, use all of our senses to be able to detect what might be a problem out there. We can detect problems with our vehicles, et cetera, et cetera. You know, there's one thing that I watch for as I'm driving at night, especially in rural areas. I watch reflectors on the side of the road ahead of me, delineator posts, right? These little reflectors that tell you where the lanes are going. And I watch those to know if there are turns coming ahead. But I watch those because those are an advanced indicator that there might be a deer coming across the road in front of me, or a cow or a horse or a moose. And I've seen all of them out on the roads. But as they walk in front of that post, it's going to make that thing black out. My headlights don't go that far, but they'll hit the reflector and come back. And so if that reflector goes dark, I immediately take my foot off of the gas, and I don't hit the brakes necessarily. I just take my foot off the gas. I'll slow a little bit until I get where that is. Sometimes there's a deer, sometimes there's a moose, but most of the time there isn't. It's a leaf that blew in front of the reflector, and I'm okay with that. It may cost me a second or two, but I'm okay with that if I can avoid having an impact with an animal or something else out in the road. So take the clues that I have. There's a cloud of dust ahead. Take your foot off the gas, and let's slow down and ensure that we're in a position where we can react if there happens to be something going on that we have to deal with. All right, here are a few videos. Go quickly on this. Watch behind this guy if you can see. You've got a front and rear facing dash cam. All right, so what happened here, and how can this person's awareness, how could they have prevented this crash in this situation? Well, what happened is this guy slowed down to make a left turn, and the vehicle behind him, a big truck, did not slow down, rear-ended him. Well, this guy was not aware of what was happening. He wasn't looking in his mirror to see this truck oncoming. He also did one thing that made the crash a lot worse. In anticipation of making a left turn, he turned his wheels the direction he wanted to go. Well, you would have failed the test in driver's ed exam, your driver's ed class. For that, you're supposed to keep your wheels straight as we're making a left turn until it's time to turn. And the reason being is exactly what happened in this crash. He got hit from behind, which forced his car to go to the left because his wheels were turned there, and he had a nearly head-on collision with a semi. So could he have prevented this crash by simply having better awareness? I think so, or at least minimized the damage that happened. Had he looked in his mirror and said, uh-oh, that guy isn't going to stop, I need to mash on my gas and try to avoid this. There's a chance that he could have totally prevented it, or at least minimized the risk. We need to be aware of all of the risks out there. Are you going to be hyper aware when you're passing a semi on slippery roads? Probably, but you may not expect a vehicle coming from the oncoming lanes on the other side of a big barrier. But I think this driver did a pretty darn good job being aware of what was happening, not only what was coming at him, but what was happening behind as well. Because for him to be able to do the maneuver that he did, he needed to know not only what was coming at him, but what was behind him. So he could, and you could see, he quickly hit the brakes and maneuvered across a couple of lanes of traffic. If he didn't know what vehicles were there, he could have been involved in another crash. And so awareness is the essential part of being a defensive driver. Now, this officer did a pretty good job at the last second, but I think he probably could have done a little bit better paying attention to what was happening. Now, there was a problem with the traffic signal. These gates and alert lights on this railroad crossing didn't work until after the crash, or until after the near miss had happened with this officer. Could the officer have maybe seen this by properly Scanning the area? I believe so. Okay, here's one that happened close to home. Pretty impactful video here. This happened in Sardine Canyon up north in the state. I'm happy to report that this trooper is okay and didn't have serious injuries from this crash. It could have been a life-ending injury just as easily. So we're very happy that he's okay. But think about this awareness during this time. And I know I've driven through Sardine Canyon in the winter, probably more than the vast majority of people in the state. And I understand the treacherous conditions that are there. But our awareness, slowing down, those types of things. However, I'm going to take another angle on this one as well. Besides the other drivers on the road, I think this officer probably could have done much better in his awareness. You know, not to pick on him, but we got the video to show this. Where's the officer walking? Well, he's walking right down those skid marks because it's easier. You don't get your feet wet and snowy if you do that. What would have been better? It would have been better for this officer to take about 3 or 4 steps to the right and put himself behind his cruiser to give him some protection. Think about that. If you're out on the road and you slide off or you get in an accident, the safest place for you to be in most cases is to stay inside of your vehicle. So think about that. And you know, if everything's okay and you look around, I don't have a lot of traffic and all of that, that's great. But if you're involved in traffic and there are cars sliding here and there, stay in your vehicle, call 911 and get the emergency services out there where they have the equipment that can help you get to safety. Stay visible. This is something that I worry about all the time. Are you folks out there in public works, public safety, fire, EMS, law enforcement? I worry about you out there working in the public right of way. You are at great risk. People are not as aware as they should be. So you've got to make extra efforts to do that. Make sure you can see what's coming at you, but also make sure they can see you. Wear those retroreflective vests and clothes, depending on what type of area you're working, and try to make eye contact. If you're out doing traffic control, those types of things, ensure that you've got eye contact. I was probably a year ago, had gone to a basketball game, and after it was a well attended basketball game, and we had lots of police officers out there directing traffic, and they were in dark clothing and did not have good retroreflective clothing on. They had a flashlight, but I found myself coming to a complete stop and asking my wife, I can't tell what's happening there. What can you see? Can you see what that officer's telling me to do? And that made me very concerned for the officers. Let's stay as visible as we can because people are not watching as they should. Okay. Space management. As we're out there driving our vehicles around, we interact with other vehicles. How we position our vehicle can determine whether we're going to have crashes or not. And it's a pretty simple thing. If I'm close to other vehicles, my chance of having a crash goes way up. So if you're driving down the freeway, ask yourself, how do vehicles space themselves? Are they pretty evenly spaced all along the freeway? Or do you have no vehicles and then a cluster of vehicles? And I think what you'll find as you look around is that vehicles really cluster in groups. They go in packs. That is the worst possible place for you to position your vehicle. Take your car and change your speed, whether it's faster or slower, it doesn't necessarily matter, just based on the conditions, and put yourself into the opening instead of in the pack. That gives you an opportunity, it gives you a buffer, and it gives you an escape path. It gives you an out. Okay. Here's a video. This is a rough one. Don't watch it if you don't want to see somebody taken out. But this is a pretty rough one. What's going on here? We got lots of traffic, big trucks. Speed's fairly heavy. If you count the following distance of this truck, it's only about 2 seconds. Oh! This little car made a decision. I imagine what they were trying to do was, hey, let's hurry and jump around as many semis as we can get around, because I know I'm getting off of this highway, and I want to get ahead of those trucks. So if you watch here, there's some late movements. They're moving multiple lanes, improper look out there. As far as other drivers out there, their spacing was rough. There was not a lot of space management going on here. People were not giving themselves out or escape paths, and unfortunately, somebody's life was lost because of these decisions. So think about that, giving yourself time and space to make the decision, and also have an out if things don't go right. Another video, similar, instead of diverging highway, this is emerging highway. All right, so what happened in this video? Well, we had a pretty significant crash from a fairly insignificant act. This guy decides to merge and jump over lanes without having proper lookout, without giving an out. Coupling that with lots of traffic together in a pack. All right, what do we do if somebody is merging? Well, a defensive driver is going to move over into the other lane to give them adequate room to do that. What if I'm the car merging? I have to have a good lookout. I got to turn my head and use my turn signals and all of those things to allow me to safely merge. But what else do I have to do as a merging vehicle? I need to get my vehicle's speed up to the speed of the traffic, so I merge at a very similar speed. When I have cars going different speeds, that's where crashes occur. And so try to manage that. Try to use the speed of your vehicle to place you in an area where you can have an out, where you can have some safety. Pretty serious consequences there when we talk about that. Okay, along the same terms, let's talk about space management. And this is talking particularly about space in front of our vehicle, our following distance. What does this mean? Well, we're at particular risk to have rear end collisions. If it's 5:30 in the afternoon and there's a crash, it's almost assuredly it's going to be a rear end collision. People are in a hurry and they're not giving adequate following distance. And when traffic slows down, then we have these fender benders. Now, majority of the time, these aren't super serious. They mess up traffic and they're an annoyance to us, but they have potential of being a really bad crash as well. So what's the problem? What's the problem with this? Why do we have so many rear end collisions, particularly at rush hour? Well, it comes down to a problem with our brain. Our brain processes information at a certain speed. It has to get that information, and if we don't get it in enough time, we're going to have a crash. So the only way to manage that is to manage our distance from the vehicle in front of us, our following distance. Just to illustrate this lag, think about your favorite Western movie. In most Western movies, you'll have the climax of the movie. We're sitting there. There's the good guy facing the bad guy out in the center of the street at high noon, and they're going to have a duel. And they're going to draw. And in most movies, stereotypically, the bad guy draws first. The good guy draws second, but he always wins. Well, that's a big lie. The reality is the guy who draws first is going to win as long as he can shoot straight. And that's illustrates the problem that we have in following distance with our vehicles. Our brain has to process the information. These photons of light from bad guy drawing his gun come through my eye and hit my optic nerve and go to my brain, and they're processed in a complex complex number of reactions that tell my brain, uh-oh, that guy's drawing, or uh-oh, there are brake lights ahead. And my brain has to go, uh-oh, what are you going to do about that? And then it makes a decision, you better hit the brakes. And then those nerve impulses have to go down through my spinal cord to tell my leg that I need to take my foot off of the gas and push the brake. And that all takes time. And that's a real problem. And so we have to have a way to manage that.
Ёб твою мать, блядь.
All right, I hope nobody speaks Russian. So tailgating. If we tailgate, we're going to have crashes. If we're too close, we're going to have crashes. Because we have this problem with our brain, that we've got this perception distance, the distance that I travel when my brain's just figuring out, uh-oh, brake lights, the reaction distance from when I take my foot off of the gas and hit the brake, that's the distance I travel there, and then the actual braking distance. Realizing that some vehicles take further to stop than others, but this doesn't change. This part of us, this part of our brain stays the same. As a matter of fact, we have at 70 miles per hour, the distance I travel and the time it takes me to figure out, uh-oh, brake lights, is about 180 feet. That's a long distance, and I could easily have run into one or multiple vehicles in that space if I haven't given myself enough space. Okay, so what is appropriate space between me and the vehicle in front of me? We advocate what they call the 3-second plus rule. And there are a lot of different takes on this out there. I like the 3-second plus because it gives us leeway to be able to modify our following distance based on conditions. What it means is that if I'm driving a good car with good brakes and good tires and all of those things, it's a bright sunny day, the roads are dry, my following distance should be 3 seconds. And that's calculated by watching the vehicle in front of me. When it passes a fixed object, a line on the road or a sign or something like that, I start counting and I do 1001, 1002, 1003, and I should not have passed that fixed point. Whenever I do pass it, that's going to be my following distance. So if I've got a 2-second or even a 1-second following distance, that's too close for my brain to be able to make the right action in time. And if there's any distraction there, that even makes it that much worse. So the 3-second plus rule starts at 3 seconds on a nice sunny day, good vehicle and all of those things. And then for every poor condition that I have, I add an additional second. So it's dark. So I automatically go from 3 seconds to 4 seconds. It starts to rain. I go from 4 seconds to 5 seconds. Okay, and so on and so forth. I give more distance, and maybe it's one of those days when we get freezing rain, or it's one of those really slippery snowstorms. I may automatically go to a 10-second following distance just because of the conditions that I have. It multiplies what I have to do. If you're driving a trailer, you're operating a vehicle pulling a trailer, start at 5 seconds, and then for every 10 feet of trailer length, you can add an additional second to it. So that can obviously add up quickly. And there's a reason why these big semis that you see out there have big following distances, and also why they travel 1 million miles without an accident. It's pretty impressive, truthfully, if you ask me. All right. So right away, when vehicles cross paths, that has a ginormous potential for bad accidents. And so we have to look at the risk associated with right-of-way violations and just dealing with intersections. There are a couple of techniques that we can use in dealing with intersections, and they're super basic, super simple. And if you'll do them, you'll end up preventing crashes in your life. How do I know that? Well, because of my own experience, and also because I've taught this class for a long time. And we've had people call up after and say, hey, remember that whole deal you told me about intersections? Yeah, it works. It saved my life today. I missed a crash that would have been a terrible crash, and I could have potentially died because I was ready. So here are the two techniques. Number one, if I'm driving through a vehicle or driving through a intersection in my vehicle on a green light, I have the right of way, everything's good. And I'm passing through that. When I just prior to getting to the intersection, I should take my foot off the gas and cover the brake, not press the brake, but just cover it. So I'm ready if something should happen. Well, what does that do? Is it going to cost me time? It might cost me a second or two. Okay. I'm willing to spare a second for the chance that I can save my life. Take your foot off the gas, cover the brake, because if somebody makes a bad decision or for whatever reason, they pass into that intersection, the opposite direction, you're ready to take action. Okay, you can reduce that reaction time significantly simply by being ready. Take your foot off the gas, cover the brake. Here's the other technique. I'm waiting at a red light. I'm the first car and the light changes green. Here's the technique. Wait for it, wait for it, wait for it. It's pretty impressive. Wait 2 seconds. As simple as that. I wait a couple of seconds for the intersection to clear, and then I go. Okay, that allows anybody who made a bad decision as far as, oh, that light will stay yellow, it'll stay yellow, it'll stay no, and they blaze through that intersection. Make sure that we're waiting those 2 seconds, and we'll prevent those crashes. Okay, these intersections can be really hazardous places. All right, speed. Speed is another one of those things that contributes to fatal crashes and contributes to a significant number of other crashes. And we pretty much understand when that happens, and we can see it. You see a news story, and they say what happened in a crash, and you look at it, and in your mind you're going, yep, they were going too fast. And it doesn't take a physicist to figure out those things. However, statisticians can tell us on here that if I'm speeding, if I'm going 10 miles per hour, over 50 miles per hour, if I'm going 60, I double my risk of dying if I'm involved in a crash. If I increase that to 70 miles per hour, I double my risk yet again, and up to 80 miles per hour, I double it again. So I'm doubling my risk of dying 3 times to drive 80 miles per hour. Does that mean you should never drive 80 miles per hour, even though the speed limit on the freeway in a good portion of the state is 80 miles per hour? That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we need to manage our risk. Let's look at what the risk is. And if it's dark and it's rainy and I'm driving through a canyon, well, I'm going to lower my speed, even if the speed limit is set higher than what I think is appropriate. We need to manage our speed based on the conditions around. Could you reasonably, if there's no traffic on I-80 west from Salt Lake out to Wendover, could you reasonably drive 100 miles per hour on I-80 going out there? Probably. The road is probably designed to handle those kinds of speeds. Would you do that? Some of you in here, yeah. That's probably a risk that a lot of us in here wouldn't make, though, because of the relative safety associated with a lower speed. We got to look at the conditions and look at what's happening and base our speed on that. Here's the video. So obviously a little fast for foggy conditions there. Base our speed on So I said something a little bit earlier talking about our speeds in relation to other vehicles. You should be assessing that at all times. What is my speed based compared to the other vehicles? If I'm way out on either end of the spectrum, I'm driving too fast or too slow, that's a problem. And I need to adjust that speed. Many times the person driving too slowly on the road is more of a hazard than the person who's driving just a little bit above the speed limit. Now, if you're going crazy over, I understand that is a major risk. But look at the differences in your speed. Here's a thought for you as well. If you're on the freeway, say there's multiple lanes, and somebody is passing you on the right, that should be an indication to you that I'm in the wrong lane, right? That my speed is maybe too slow for the lane that I'm in. So look at that. If they're passing you, if you're getting passed by a great amount of speed, or you're passing people at a great amount of speed and find yourself weaving in and out of traffic, you've got an issue with your speed. Okay, so how do we manage our speed? Here's a few simple things. One is managing our time. I'm far less likely to speed if I've got plenty of time to get where I'm going. So how do I know how long it takes to get from Salt Lake to St. George? Well, it's pretty simple. I've got this cool app on my phone, and I put it in way ahead of my trip, and it tells me it's going to take 4 hours and 27 minutes or whatever it is it pops up with. And I'll say, okay, that's what it says. So I'm going to add some buffer into there because I'm going to have to take a break somewhere along the way. There could be traffic, there could be who knows what. And so I'm going to build that into my trip. If we'll plan ahead, you can even set these applications so it will automatically pop up and tell you it's time to go. And that can be really beneficial, and it can help you to avoid the temptation to speed. Monitor your speed regularly. Okay, take a look and see what's going on. Have you ever looked down and said, "Oh my gosh"? Look at the tools that are available. Use your cruise control in appropriate settings. Appropriate meaning dry roads and not a ton of traffic there. Be alert to what's going around, the other speed of other vehicles on the road. Lower your speed if you have some iffy zones. What do I mean by that? School zones, work zones, flashing lights of any kind. Take your foot off the gas and slow down. Now, we're legally obligated to do that, but it doesn't tell us how much we have to slow down. I would be looking at the given situation and making those decisions based on that. But also remember, the kind of work that we're in, we work with these folks that are out there doing these tasks, and these are our friends, these are our coworkers, and they might be our family members out there. Let's slow down and give those emergency workers get over, and give them some slower speeds down to give them the ability to be safe and do their job. Let tailgaters pass. I think this is a pretty simple way to avoid conflicts, and also keep us from being tempted to go too fast. Just pull over and allow that tailgater to get around you. All right. I told Mike, I said, yeah, the second one's always longer. We're going to burn through a couple of slides here and finish up this presentation. Like I said, we condensed a bunch of stuff into here, and we'll end up at an hour, but we'll skip a couple of slides here. Personal preparation and preparing our vehicles. Let's talk about that. Staying alert means staying awake. I don't know about you, but this is a battle that I fight really on a daily basis. It's something that that 2 o'clock in the afternoon comes, and I know I've got to be on the top of my game, or I could really get drowsy when I'm driving. And I drive a lot of miles, and I drive at really bad times to be driving. And those are risks that I've had to mitigate as it's been part of my job, the same way a police officer has to deal with working graveyard shift and all of that. We compensate for these things by getting the appropriate amount of sleep and working to stay awake. I think drowsy driving is worse than DUI. I've had people in my class come up and say, hey, I drove 30 miles one night and I have absolutely no recollection of any of it. I pulled into my driveway and it scared me to death. The guy said, I basically had a panic attack as I pulled into the driveway because I couldn't remember any of my drive. His eyes were open and he made it home, but had a child run out in front of him or a vehicle run a stop sign, he wouldn't have been able to respond to that. So you don't have to be asleep to be drowsy when you're driving, right? You can miss an exit, you can pass something and go, when did I pass that? So here's a couple of things to think about on drowsy driving. If you start to feel it come on, pull over, take a nap, walk around, take a little walk, get a snack, whatever it may be. If you're sleepy though, take a nap. Your body physiologically says, I'm going to sleep, and it's gonna. So give it the opportunity to have that 10-minute nap, 15-minute nap on the side of the road, and that will keep you safer going down the road. Change your drivers to somebody who is more alert. If you can't carry on a conversation with somebody that is lucid, get out from behind the wheel. Well, those are techniques that we can use. I can have a conversation. I can listen to a book. There are many things that I can do. How about snacks and energy drinks and coffee and all of those things? Be very careful about those. Ones, they can be strong distractions, but two, if we lean too much on those energy drinks or caffeine, they can really let us down. They have a quick hit and they're followed by a crash, right? Our body gets that buzz, but we're still tired, and then we crash. And they did research on this and found that many drowsy driving crashes had been stopped by a police officer within 45 minutes prior to the crash happening, because they'd been going out of their lane or something like that, and they got a quick buzz when the cop pulled them over. But then down the road, they were still tired and crashed. Take the time to pull over and get the rest that you need. Get enough rest the night before. All right, I'm just going to say we'll watch this one video and I'll hit this one subject just briefly, and that is distracted driving. So I'm a distracted driver. Not intentionally. We have a lot of stuff going on in our vehicles. We have a lot of stuff going around our vehicles. If I have passengers, if I have objects in there, we need to work to reduce those distractions. So if that means I open my bag of Cheetos before I leave, if I open my drink before I leave, or those types, place things where I can reach those are eliminating distractions. If I've got to read that text message when it comes in, turn your phone off. All your phones will have a setting in there where you can set it to do not disturb. It'll even send out a nice message that says this person won't answer your message until they're done driving. That's an easy way to do that. You can simply turn your device off and put it in the glove compartment so you don't have to worry about that. But let's eliminate those distractions. Okay, I have hit an hour. So I want to wrap up. Mike, did we have any questions?
Yeah, we actually did. Alyssa had a question where she asked about following distance. She says, I try to leave space and I prefer a lot of extra space for the reasons that you mentioned. However, I find someone is constantly pulling into the extra space that I leave. Sometimes it is close enough, I need to slam on my brakes. Is there a healthy way to account for that, or is that just a healthy way?
Yeah, it's a frustration. And I get it, but I advocate for the following distance. I would rather have that happen, even multiple times a day. Hey, this guy keeps jumping in, or people jump in front of me. I'm okay with that if at the end of the day I don't end up rear-ending the guy in front of me. There's not necessarily a technique that we can prevent that, but just realize that, hey, I'm doing it right, and if it costs me an extra second or so in getting home, I'm okay with that, because in the long term, then I don't have those crashes. So I wish I had a perfect answer to that, where we could stop people from doing that, but that's just the reality. Okay. Was there others?
Yeah, she was just at, she says, I still leave the space. I was just wondering if there was a better way to keep that distance.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
Yep.
Was that all? Was that
Yep,
all?
that was it.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you, folks. I appreciate you sticking around for an hour today. I know that's a chunk of your day to devote to this, but I'm here to tell you, these simple techniques can save your life. They can save the life of your family members, and so I just want to go back and say, what's your goal? Is there something in here today that you said, I need to do that? I have a problem with I follow people too closely, or you know what, I make it a standard habit to drive 5 miles per hour over the speed limit, or whatever it is. Let's set a goal and let's work on that. It might be courtesy out on the road. I'm not going to get mad at that guy when he jumps in front of my following distance. I'm going to deal with those things. Let's pick some of those and go forward and get better. And I'm here to tell you, next time we get together and do this next year, we will have prevented some accidents and probably saved some serious injury or even a fatality from that, because we're being defensive in our driving. If you have any questions, please type those in the chat box. We'll wrap it up now, but I'll hang around after if you have some additional questions there. And thanks so much, folks, for all you do out there. We appreciate the work you do in our communities to make Utah a better and a safer place. Go out and have a safe day. Thanks.